Good morning, and welcome to our continuing series, Interviews with Disciples and Devotees. The other day, we had the honor to meet Partho, and today he's with us again. I'm very happy to say Namaste. And today it's most important subject I feel in the world. Education. How did you get into education?
As I shared the other day, for me it wasn't anything planned. I just happened to have a good academic background in college, and Tara Didi, in charge of the ashram, felt that school would be the best option for me, so she just took me to Mirambika.
Right.
And I had never experienced school of that kind before, ever, because I have always studied in a conventional school, and here I was in a school that didn't look like a school. Children were really children, playing, enjoying, running around, and the teachers were not like teachers. They were friendly, they were very spontaneous, they were happy. There's no, I couldn't sense any kind of a burden anywhere or anyone doing something because it has to be done. No sense of a task or a chore. I mean, things were just so
Or a sense
fluid.
of superiority.
Yes, yeah.
Not that.
Absolutely, yeah. It was like everyone was
Yeah.
at the same level.
Yeah,
It didn't matter who was the teacher and who was a student. It was very nice. So I just felt something very deep happen inside, and I said, "This is it. The rest of my life is going to be my work." And so that's how it turned out. I mean, now it's been nearly 30 years that I've been doing work in education. But education specifically, Madhu and Sri Aurobindo's whole vision.
And how
of
has your
education.
philosophy of education evolved?
One of the things I myself brought into my work in education was my own experiences with schooling and I happen to be a student at one of the best colleges in the country, which gets the so-called creme de la creme. And
What is
though
it?
I had a
You can mention it.
St. Stephen's College in Delhi. St. Stephen's College.
St. Stephen.
St. Stephen's College in Delhi. And at that time we had most of our faculty coming in from Cambridge University. And so it was a very good, we had a very good faculty, especially in English, which I was doing. I was doing an honors course in English, and it was good. It was good. They allowed us a lot of leeway, free thinking. We could do a lot of things on our own. All that was good, but what was being studied, the content, that was very disappointing. And I had also come out of what's called the ICSE board, the ISCE actually, Indian School Certificate Examination Board. It was one of the leading board. At that time, it was the leading board of the country. Quality education was synonymous with ISCE education. And I was again very disappointed with that. So that was something I was carrying in me, and I knew somewhere almost a gut feeling that schooling is not working out in this country. But I couldn't articulate it so well at that time. I could just sort of feel it, and I didn't know what to do about it. So Mirambika, which was the first consciously tried experiment in free progress education outside of Pondicherry, first, I would say first in the country, if not the world.
Have you seen it in the ashram, in the school?
The ashram school.
At
yes.
Knowledge, have you seen
Yes.
it in action?
I spent the early years I used to come. I would always go to the school and spend time there. I could talk to a lot of people, so I knew what was going on in Pondicherry. But more than that, I had read about the experiments, the three of them that Mother herself conducted in Pondicherry. She called the Free Progress. So I had a fairly good idea of what free progress could be like. So Mirambika was really the first conscious step in that direction. And when I got into Mirambika, I just knew this was the answer. And Yes, and then I started my own studies in Sri Aurobindo's work, Sri Aurobindo's yoga, how the integral yoga connected with integral education, and how integral education itself was, I would say, the rendering of integral yoga for the young mind, for the young spirit, almost an acceleration, if I may use that word, of the whole integral yogic process. So if instead of going through the integral yogic process, which demands a certain maturity of being, if that could be brought to children in a very natural, effortless way, then we could probably look forward to children, sun-eyed children of a marvelous dawn.
Marvelous dawn, yes. About what age? Beginning at what age?
I would say beginning at a very early age. I mean, as an educator now, with my experience of nearly 30 years, I would say that the earlier we begin, the better. Because psychic education would be the pivot of this educational process, of this growth process.
Could you expand on that a bit?
An education that would very consciously, deliberately work on the self, the inner awareness, the awareness of having something within oneself, a presence within oneself that would be, if not as real, and almost as real as the life one would live outside. I think I have felt most children. I remember my own childhood where one had a very rich inner life, and one would live for extended periods of time inwardly. But there was no one at that time to, gently take us from that inward life a little bit more inward, a little bit deeper, and probably bring us into touch with one's innermost self. So today I can see how important that is for children, because wherever I see, and I work with the university, I have done lots of workshops with university students, with high school students.
Yes, I see.
Yeah, so a lot of work in the country, and everywhere I see one thing missing, gap, which is this which I call the inmost being. There's no sense of one's innermost being or innermost life. Everything is on the outside. Everything is surface. So I'm very sure of this, that an education that will make sense for children, for grown-ups too, would be one that would make you conscious of the inmost presence, and to enable you to live more and more in that inner presence. So that's psychic education as I understand it. And I see it to be the hub of the entire learning and growing process. Integral education, of course, also gives a lot of importance to the development of the mind beyond just the academic, developing the faculties of the mind, not just existent faculties, but perhaps also beginning to probe our unawakened faculties, the ones we probably don't even know exist within us. It's the only education system that I see has the possibility of opening the mind to something beyond its own thinking range. And then, of course, the vital education, which takes care of this huge chunk of life that we live in the vital.
Yes.
And again, with my experience with children, I have seen that the real learning takes place only when the vital is in order, is in harmony, is organized. If the vital is all over the place, learning in the mind becomes very difficult. So most of the problems that people talk of these days as a learning problem is really a vital issue, and has to be addressed as such.
They're bombarded with the lower vital today.
Yes, and we are living in this consumerism of today, which could have been a very nice thing, really, has come down to this, so much of the lower vital.
Yes.
So, and it's everywhere. It's all pervasive now.
It is.
Everywhere.
It is.
So all the more reason that we need a deeper anchor, a deeper rooting in the consciousness. And education, traditionally, at least in our country, was always a process of taking you to the next level of being. Education would necessarily be evolutionary, not utilitarian as it has become today. I think primarily because of the British influence, spread over 200 years, has completely discarded the
But
traditional
was
Indian
India
approach
ready
to
for that
education.
evolutionary education even before the British? Because it seems that they weren't ready to
No,
self-govern.
if we take it as in a general sense, in the mass, no, they
Okay,
weren't ready.
okay.
But education, again, I believe even as of today, as we speak, the kind of education that needs to come to children, what I call the evolutionary education, would always be for a certain, I call it the consciousness elite, certain people, children, young adults, even parents and teachers who would be sort of an avant-garde. They are the ones who would take it to the next level, and then the general would follow. It's always a movement like that. But today we don't even have an education for the forerunners, for the leaders, for the avant-garde. We don't have an education for that. Sitting in a country like India, working with Indian children, I find that they have absolutely no idea of what India is all about, what India's true spiritual and cultural heritage is what, it's, yes, I mean, I do believe that we need to be very much in sync with the rest of the world. Globalization is a phenomenon that's good, and it's something that we need for the human race. But a globalization without an inward rooting in one's own culture doesn't make sense.
Yes.
Again, we are all over the place because there's no rooting. So, and what are just if you come to Sri Aurobindo in his thought and his work, see what a fantastic lineage, what a fantastic tradition we have in this country, and we've completely lost it. The whole the richness, the complexity of a true intellectual life, which schooling and university education should bring, is completely missing. Everything has been made so superficial, so utilitarian. So we need an education system which consciously changes the thing, and this has to be for a certain elite to begin with. That's my feeling. And then once it takes root with what let's call it a more evolved intelligentsia of the country, cultural leaders, thought leaders. That's a good phrase, thought leaders. And then they would probably filter it down to the rest who come into schooling, into education.
So, is your focus primarily now on these thought leaders, or is it also still on the children?
No,
or
children,
both?
Children, both, both.
And what has been the response at the
And
university
teachers.
level?
University level, again, I'm sad to say there's hardly any response at the university level. University level, from my experience, I've seen that either it's the old beaten track of higher education in the country, which is just taking up a course and getting a degree and probably going on to do some PhD, but without real quality of work. I don't see much of excellence in thought, excellence in culture in the higher studies. And just about everyone is using university education as a stepping stone to probably studying in the Ivy League universities or getting well-paying corporate jobs. So again, the utilitarianism.
It is. It's all money oriented.
It's all money oriented. Either that or the things that academia does within itself. This is research, PhDs, which, again, to my mind, does not have too much of a real-life relevance or impact. Right? It's not truly or effectively impacting social life, political life in this country, political discourse in this country, meaningful cultural, social discourse in this country, which is supposed to stem from our university education. It's just not happening. And today, as we speak, we are in a certain environment in this country where one can't even speak openly about Indian values, Indian culture, Indian civilization. You know? One has to couch it in a politically correct language, which again is very sad. So we need to breathe freer. There needs to be a more invigorating, more vital culture in education.
Have you been able to identify certain people who are open to your teaching?
There are, yes. There are. I mean, all over there are people. And I'm happy to say this, that there are more young people today who are beginning to articulate this need for something deeper. And these are the people, these are the young people I see who are rebels. They don't want the old system anymore. They don't want the utilitarian approach to education and life anymore. They want to do something meaningful, something different. So that kind of thinking, that kind of aspiration is growing. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing that's happening.
And we have Oroville,
Yeah.
where there are many free thinkers and aspirants.
And these are the people we need to reach out to.
Yes.
These are the people
Yes.
who need to come together
Yes.
in a common platform, a common forum.
Yes.
And that's where education as an establishment needs to encourage such thinking.
But that is also needed in Oroville.
In Auroville, yes, for
It is.
sure. Auroville, I personally feel, and somewhere I know inwardly that Auroville is the cradle of the next civilization, if I may say so.
It's meant to save the world.
Yes. And I, for one, I'm not too disturbed about things that are happening or not happening in Auroville, because it's part of the cause. Because if a place is meant to be a cradle for the next civilization, it has to go through its own churning. It has to necessarily.
It has to contain all the elements.
It has to contain, and it's perhaps the worst
Yes,
for the
certainly.
whole churning to happen.
Certainly.
And the final solutions will for sure emerge from Auroville, because I see Auroville as the first conscious, what Sri Aurobindo at one point had called it a proto-Gnostic community, a community before the Gnostic community happened, sort of a preparation for it. You know. So in that sense, Auroville and what is happening in education in Auroville is critically important. But having said that, I must also say a lot needs to be done within Auroville in education. And education, again, when we talk of education, the integral sense, then we're not talking about schooling. We're not talking about higher education confined to four walls of university. We're talking about life. All life is education. All life is learning.
Yoga.
All life is learning. So, an education that includes life, that has a wider canvas, a wider sweep, where you don't have to go to school to learn, where living is learning. So, where mentors walk with you, work with you, you learn directly from people who are living that. An education that makes you plastic enough, fluid enough, alive enough to receive something from above, instead of just being cabined in the box of the here and now. Something that makes you receive from above. Yes, that kind of education, that kind of learning, that has to spread now. That's the future of schooling, I think.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Mother has written to a friend of mine, Dmitri Van Morenschild, who lived here in the ashram till 100. He passed at 100. She wrote, "The light is everywhere, the force is everywhere, and the world is so small.
That's beautiful. The light is everywhere, the force is everywhere, and the world is so small.
So, what are you doing at present in this field that you've sort of charted out through your reading of Sri Aurobindo, your opening to Sri Aurobindo and Mother? Can you articulate it in a certain way that people want to know?
What am I doing right now?
Yeah.
One of the things that I would like to share, and I share this with great delight, is that education is one thing that has come, in the heart of my heart, I believe it has come directly from her. It's her gift to me for this life. Because I never went out to be an educator. I never did that kind of study in education. It just sort of came. And it's more than my passion. I think it's my karma yoga. So what I'm doing now is helping people, wherever they may be, to think of education differently, to rethink education, rethink schooling. And wherever I find there's an opening, my partner and I, we are now spending, I think, all our waking hours in trying to do this. Wherever there's an opening, we want to get in and make that happen. Wherever there's an opening to conscious education, to integral education, to evolutionary education. So we just want to make that happen. So there's a project in Mumbai, there's a project where we live in Chandigarh, which is integral education with underprivileged children, which is working beautifully. Because the underprivileged children, there's so much of hunger for learning, and the kind of schooling they get is dismal. So an integral education for that class of children, I think, can directly contribute to the country's future. And of course, with urban children, the urban elite, the kind of schooling they're getting is also equally dismal. They too are underprivileged, but in another sense.
Yes.
So, to bring them something of what I would call a free progress, a psychic-centered education. So that's what we are doing, and I'm just in the process of getting involved with the Oro University, the only university in the world which has been set up with a conscious aspiration for Sri Aurobindo and Mother's work.
Let's talk about that in our next session.
Yes, for
Good.
sure.
Thank you so much.